As far as I can see, the would-be tyrants have nothing left but censorship, and by God, they're going hell for leather now to shut us up about anything and everything. Millions of people are sharing and spreading the truth, and those determined to control us or just to be rid of us know the truth is their kryptonite. Pushing as hard as anyone towards the sound of silence, the silence of the people, are the United Nations, the UN. Almost the last act of the latest G20 Leaders Summit in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil this week was the declaration of yet another global initiative. This one to crack down on what they call climate change disinformation. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Not one of their doomsday predictions about sea levels and glaciers and ice-free poles and polar bears, none of it has happened. Just as a for instance, the Daily Sceptic reported this week that Greenland has been getting colder for the last 20 years. And remember, if the tyrants describe something as global, a global crisis requiring a global solution, and if part of their solution demands silencing dissent, then whatever it is a scam and a fraud. Anyway, if it's disinformation about climate change you want, then the UN is the font of all nonsense. Their latest brain fart, a so-called Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change, is only a symptom, a last desperate gasp from those who would control every aspect of our lives to stop more of the truth coming out. And so the UN, like the rest of them, have decided there's nothing else for it but literally to stop us sharing facts and truth. So, in Rio, they announced a collaboration between the United Nations, UNESCO and the government of Brazil, quote, the Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change. It's an attempt, they told each other, to address disinformation campaigns that are delaying and derailing climate action, by which is meant people knowing and sharing the fact there is no climate crisis are getting in the way of scams designed to make people cold, hungry, poor, and so utterly dependent on centralised authority. Quote, the initiative responds to the commitment in the Global Digital Compact adopted by the United Nations member states at the Summit of the Future in September 2024. Remember the Summit for the Future and the Pact for the Future? That's what they came up with when the pesky people rumbled the World Health Organisation's attempt to assume power over all member states in the event of the next scamdemic. So the UN picked up the soggy remains of that power grab and turned it into the Pact for the Future instead. Same impertinent power grab in a different wrapper. But I digress. Back in Rio, they were telling each other the pact encourages UN entities in collaboration with governments and relevant stakeholders to assess the impact of mis- and disinformation on the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Everywhere you look, there's a petty dictator putting his hand over the mouths of free people, smothering the truth. In Australia, Communications Minister Michelle Rowland and her cronies have just this week had to drop a misinformation and disinformation bill that would have enabled the state in that poor, benighted, once and future prison island of Australia to censor misleading information. Do you like that? Misleading. How vague can you get? Fools are misled all the time by all sorts. You don't need new laws about it. But at least the bill failed, for now, for want of support from ministers. Investigative journalist and free speech warrior Michael Shellenberger was down under in time to see the bill fall over. He talked about the knife edge upon which civilization itself rests now.
I'm looking at the solution. The solution to misinformation is freedom of speech. And that's been the solution to misinformation for several hundred years. Ever since we stopped having to ask the king for permission to say certain things. He describes this, that all of these debates that we appear to be, that people are treating as though they're completely new conversations, how to deal with false information, how to deal with hatred. These debates have been occurring for 2,500 years. There's no new arguments on any side of this. We're just repeating ourselves. And it goes back and forth, and you often see the people that want the censorship, they want to carve out, as John was describing, free speech for the elites, for the professors, for the experts. They should be able to talk, but the rabble, they should not be allowed to have free speech rights, and that the only solution to it was government regulation or censorship of social media. That's why Keir Starmer is letting sex offenders and pedophiles out of prison and putting people who put racist memes or social media posts in prison. It's another word would be anarcho-tyranny, or they say two-tier Keir. It's a radical assault on the standard of equal justice under the law.
The would-be totalitarians are everywhere, all out of ideas and determined only to stifle the truth. It's been one lie after another for years. More or less everything from the scamdemic onwards that involves us, the people, losing more or paying more. The European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, hailed as the leader of the free world since Donald J. Trump won the latest election in the United States, has labelled misinformation and disinformation the gravest threat the world faces, bigger than wars or climate change. Aye, right. I don't know how I can put it more plainly. The leaders are lying, and they know we know they're lying. And they think that by preventing us sharing the truth, they will be able to make us listen to nothing but lies. Over in Rio, the scam is about shutting up anyone who might get in the way of what they call sustainable development goals. Those goals, if pursued, will immiserate millions, if not billions of people. Always they are working towards centralisation of money, of energy, of health, of the food supply. Pay attention to the C words, I say. The threats to life and liberty are about control, about centralisation, about coercion. The green agenda isn't about saving the planet, it's about greed. It's about the likes of Ed Miliband sacrificing the well-being of the population of Britain so he can tout vanity projects and strut around at COP whichever. Populist movements here, there and everywhere, in Britain, the US, across Europe, in South America, are made of desperate people hoping and praying for someone who might listen to them and give them what they want and need, which is equality before the law, freedom of speech, cheap accessible energy and not virtue signalling windmills, education, not indoctrination for their children, streets that are safe to walk down. The people voting populist know they won't get any of that from the totalitarians masquerading as leftist and liberal. They might not get it from any of the billionaires, but we must live in hope. Whatever you think of Elon Musk, he has freed Twitter, or X if you prefer, from the totalitarians who had sought to make it a hellscape of liberal and leftist lies and nothing else. When it comes to free speech, X is about as good as it gets right now. The hoaxes are everywhere and completely transparent, plain to see by anyone with their eyes open. Governments lied to their people about the thing they called COVID so they could tout a pandemic that was a hoax that enabled the greatest transfer of wealth from poor to rich in all of human history, as well as tightening the leash around our necks. While Western governments continue to lie to their people that the war in Ukraine is about defending democracy, the truth is it's for the profit of warmongers and to provoke regime change in Russia. What's happening in Gaza is a plausible genocide, despite the lies of the Israeli regime and those supporting that regime. There is no climate emergency, making the so-called climate crisis another hoax. All of it's about making money and increasing control over our lives until soon enough it might be hard to breathe. War criminals like Tony Blair walk the streets with impunity, having lied us into an illegal war in Iraq 20 years ago that killed 1 million people, most recently pushing for the digital IDs that are his fantasy project, while regular people are jailed for opinions aired on social media. Here in Britain, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's latest ruse is what he's calling respect orders, which he says will target behaviour likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. Starmer said the respect orders were a simple but effective way of tackling antisocial behaviour which blights communities. He said the measure had teeth, as people who breached orders could be arrested. No such prospect awaits high-profile paedophiles and war criminals, but that's two-tier Keir for you. In a world run by criminal cartels determined to asset-strip civilization until nothing remains but digital feudalism, the ultimate enemy is the truth. Whatever happens next, keep speaking it. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but.